Some people were just born to be who they'll be. From an early age, Elon Musk demonstrated that same insatiable curiosity and entrepreneurial spirit that we see today. At the age of 12, Elon made his first sale, $500 for Blastar, a computer space game. And with that sale, an entrepreneur was born. Elon went on to study business and physics at Wharton and the University of Pennsylvania. Upon graduation, he entered a graduate program in applied physics and material science at Stanford. And Elon did what we all think about doing. He stayed exactly 2 days. Entrepreneurship couldn't wait. He went on to found Zip2, PayPal, SpaceX, and Tesla. And a lot of us juggle multiple priorities and try and be high achievers. Elon has truly taken it to a next level. He's currently the CEO and product architect of Tesla Motors, the CEO and CTO of SpaceX, and the non-executive chairman and principal shareholder of SolarCity. At SpaceX, he's the chief designer, overseeing development of rockets and spacecraft for missions to Earth orbit and ultimately to other planets. At Tesla, he's overseen product development design from the beginning, include the Roadster that you see outside and the Model S sedan. Transitioning to a sustainable energy economy in which electric vehicles do play a pivotal role has been one of his central interests for 20 years, stemming from his time as a physics student working on ultracapacitors in Silicon Valley. Now, the awards for Elon are truly too numerous to name. I will touch on a few of them. In 2007, Elon was recognized for his work by Research and Development magazine, receiving the Innovator of the Year award. He received the 2007 and 8 American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics Award for the greatest contribution to the field of space transportation. In 2008, Elon was named as one of 75 most influential people in the 21st century by Esquire magazine. He received the Aviation Week 2008 laureate for the most significant achievement worldwide in the space industry. 2009, the National Space Society awarded Musk the von Braun Trophy, given for leadership of the most significant achievement in space. And in 2010, Elon was the youngest recipient of the Auto Executive of the Year Innovator Award for his work at Tesla, and most recently named to the Time 100 for 2010. I can tell you, as a Tesla board member, I've watched Elon provide not only the vision for the company, but provide intensely focused execution of the company's business plan and recruitment of the best and brightest people. I've seen an extraordinary leader who demands not only the best from his team, but backs it up by being the hardest working guy at the company. Now, Elon has a number of titles: serial entrepreneur, founder, CEO, product architect, CTO, chief designer, and many more. What I'm most privileged to call Elon is my friend. I know how difficult it was for him to be here today, managing 2 companies. I want to personally thank you, Elon, for the effort. Here to talk about entrepreneurship, what it means to prove naysayers wrong. Here to talk about Tesla's amazing ride and IPO. And talking about the clean tech's most prominent IPO, my friend, Elon Musk.
I'll give you maybe a bit of background on why Tesla, why SolarCity, and some of the other things that I've done. I certainly never expected to see the level of success that's occurred, because I'm actually an engineer, but I discovered that in order to do the engineering that I want to do, I have to have my own company. Otherwise, somebody makes me do something I don't want to do. The thing that kind of unites the companies that I've started was when I was in college, I thought about what would most affect the future of humanity. And the 3 things that I could come up with were the internet, the transition to sustainable energy, both the production and consumption of energy in a sustainable manner, and the third was space exploration, in particular making life multiplanetary. And I did not expect ever to be involved in the space side of things. Those were simply what I thought were most important in the abstract. But fortunately, via some capital, I was able to acquire from selling some internet companies that allowed me to enter the space arena. So, in fact, I originally came out to Silicon Valley, as Ira mentioned, to with the intent of doing a PhD at Stanford in applied physics and material science. but really with a fairly pragmatic goal, which was to try to solve the energy storage problem for electric cars. And that I was going to pursue high energy density capacitors. And if anyone's looking for an idea that's maybe worth pursuing, I don't know whether success is one of the possible outcomes, but here's the idea, which is to use advanced chip-making equipment and leverage the tens of billions of dollars that goes into advanced chip-making equipment to create a solid-state, ultra-high energy density capacitor. If you could do that, that would supersede all batteries. But again, I'm not sure success is one of the possible outcomes. That remains to be seen. And so that was my intent. I was going to basically, I didn't really care about the degree, actually. I really just needed their labs. So I knew I could get sort of free labs if I was a student. So that's actually why I was doing the grad program. And then in the summer of '95, it became evident to me that the internet was going to be something very significant. It was, and that I had the choice of either spending several years as a grad student and watching the internet happen, or taking part in it, and then circling back to electric vehicles later. So I thought, well, I can pursue a PhD in something where success may not be one of the possible outcomes, or I can participate in the internet, which seemed like a much higher likelihood of being able to do something significant. And that's what prompted me to start Zip2 with a couple other people, and then X.com, which later became PayPal. Fortunately, those turned out to be quite good. Again, I didn't expect them to be good. I actually expected them to fail. In fact, when I put my studies at Stanford on deferment, I called the chair of the department and said, I'm sure I'll be back in about 3 months. And he said, this is probably the last conversation we'll have. He was correct. So after selling PayPal to eBay, we initially took PayPal public in February 2002, which was quite a dark time for internet companies. Just as last year was a fairly dark time for an IPO or almost any company. But I actually do believe the market can recognize fundamentals, and so we took PayPal public in early 2002, and then sold to eBay in mid-2002. And since I was the largest shareholder in the company, that gave me the capital needed to start SpaceX and Tesla. Although not a lot of capital by the standards of those industries. Ultimately, after taxes, I had about maybe $180 million. And as it turns out, I ended up investing all of that in SpaceX, Tesla, and SolarCity. Actually got to the point where I actually literally had to borrow money from friends to pay the bills. It's a bit awkward. But that situation is thankfully corrected itself, and with the Tesla IPO and whatnot. So let's see. So the story of Tesla, since this is obviously a clean tech forum, is sort of an interesting one. I initially thought that there wouldn't really be a need for a new company to come in and do electric vehicles, because if people recall, there was the EV1, there was the RAV4 EV, and it looked like there was momentum in the direction of electric vehicles. So that's cool. So that there's no need for some new entrant to enter the game. And then, in a remarkable turn of events, GM and Toyota recalled the vehicles, and GM crushed them in a lot somewhere. If people have seen Who Killed the Electric Car, you know what I'm talking about. I think, well, in retrospect, that was an unwise move for General Motors. And you know, if you've seen the movie, it's a good movie, Who Killed the Electric Car. the customers that had the EV1 were extremely, I mean, they loved the car. They loved the car to the degree that they actually tracked down where the wrecking yard where GM was going to crush the cars and held a candlelit vigil like it was a capital murder or somebody was being put to death. And I think companies ought to take note when customers hold candlelit vigils for their products. That's unusual, particularly for a General Motors product. So I think that says maybe you should do it EV2 and that sort of thing. Anyway, so I was somewhat dismayed by that. So when I learned that there was a small company in Southern California called AC Propulsion that had done a prototype, just a very sort of rough prototype of an electric car called the T0. I got a test drive in the car. It clearly showed that the timing was right to create a compelling electric car. The advent of lithium-ion really being the key enabling technology. And so I didn't initially want to run Tesla because I was running SpaceX. And so I thought, well, you know what, I'm just going to apply 20% of my time, work on the product design, and then find some other partners to run the company. That didn't work out, unfortunately. And Ira is aware of the difficult issues we went through with the company coming very close to death on many occasions. I mean, a car company is not an easy thing to create at the best of times. And the last few years were certainly not the best of times, particularly for car companies. I mean, this was an environment where General Motors went bankrupt. I think people, it's the first time General Motors has ever gone bankrupt. And if that environment can sort of lay low a company like General Motors, you can imagine that it's pretty tough sledding if you're a new car company that nobody's ever heard of, and you're trying to sell this electric car, which sounds like kind of crazy technology. And it's a high-end two-seater sports car. So it was definitely some tough going there. I think I still have mental scar tissue, actually, from that period. But we managed to get through it, and narrowly, and managed to get some good partners on our side that were really key, and certainly immensely grateful to them. Daimler being the first. And Daimler made a key investment in Tesla in early 2009, and also agreed to buy battery packs from us for their electric smart car. And that relationship has actually continued to grow, with Daimler making some incremental investments into Tesla, and then increasing the business as well. So now we're doing the battery pack and charger for the Mercedes A-Class. And then last year, Toyota invested in Tesla, and we'll be doing the whole powertrain for the electric RAV4, which is coming out in 2012. So that's, I think, I'm very excited about that, and I think it's a powerful symbolism. It's sort of the resurrection of the RAV4 EV, and I think it's going to be a really, really compelling mass-market electric car. And then, for our internal development, we have the Model S, which is, I think, really going to be a great car. Our goal with the Model S is to make, well, our aspiration is to make the best car on the roads. So it's a car that is superlative in almost every dimension, and a car that you would buy even if it wasn't electric. I mean, I think that's a very important distinction. You want people to buy the car, you don't want people to have to accept a bunch of negative things in order to be environmental. You want to create the best product, and such that even if somebody doesn't care about the environment, that they would still buy it. And that's really our goal with the Model S, to be superlative in safety, in ride and handling, fit and finish, performance, aesthetics, and seems to be going quite well. The Audi A8, which is also an aluminum car, as made in Germany, is considered kind of, I think, technologically the leader in vehicle engineering. But we think there are good arguments to say that the Model S is actually superior in vehicle engineering to the Audi A8. And if you look at the objective metrics such as torsional rigidity, stiffness to weight, strength to weight, the joining techniques, the usable internal volume, I think one can reasonably argue that it is going to be the most advanced car in the world, even excluding the electric powertrain element. So, like I said, we want this to be the best car, even if it wasn't electric. I think for a lot of people in the room, or probably most people in the room, are American, and I think it's I think Tesla is an American car company you can sort of refer to. I think we'll think of as, hey, this is a car company that you can really be proud of, as an American. Just as we're very proud of, the Apples and Googles and whatnot, Intel, Cisco. This is a car company where, for the first time in a long time, the United States is the leader in automotive technology. And it's just interesting to note that you've got Daimler, the company that invented the internal combustion engine car, that's coming to Tesla and having us supply them with electric powertrain components. You've got Toyota, the largest car company in the world, and the leader in hybrids, also coming to Tesla to supply them with electric powertrain. I think people would have had a hard time imagining that such a thing would occur several years ago. So, I encourage everyone to buy a Model S. I got to sell cars, and I think you will not regret it. So I think with that, I can maybe go ahead.
By 2020, what's your imagination about the size and weight of the battery?
Well, you have to say size and weight of the battery for a given energy density or given energy content, I guess. Great strides have already been made. I mean, the Roadster has about a 56 kilowatt-hour battery and yields a combined highway-city range of about 245 miles. In fact, there's some customers that have driven our car over 300 miles. Recently, a customer actually set the record and drove a Roadster for 347 miles on a single charge. And then the Model S will actually have up to a 90 kilowatt-hour battery. So it's a big increase. But we've improved the volumetric energy density by almost 50% compared with the Roadster, and the gravimetric energy density by about 35%. So pretty big strides in a relatively short period of time. And whereas the Roadster uses an almost unmodified laptop cell, an 18650 cell, with the Model S, we've worked closely with Panasonic to create a dedicated automotive cell, same form factor, so it can still make use of the economies of scale used to produce 18650 cells, but the internals are different. It's really well optimized for automotive. In 2020, I think it's going to be, it's going to be really just dirt cheap to have a long-range battery. I mean, I think all transportation is actually going to go electric. Planes, trains, automobiles, everything, with ironically one exception being rockets. And unfortunately, there's no way to avoid Newton's third law, and you need to expel high pressure gas at high velocity in order to escape Earth's gravity. But apart from that, everything's going to be pure electric, not hybrid, pure electric. A prediction that I've been making for a while is that, I feel very comfortable in making these predictions, because I think it will occur sooner, that's why I've actually been willing to take, if somebody wants to bet me on this, I'm happy to bet them, which is that by 2030, a majority of all new cars manufactured in the United States will be pure electric. So, just under 20 years. And 20 years after that, so by mid-century, the vast majority of cars on the road will be pure electric. It always takes time to replace the install base and the legacy products, but that's what I expect. And the fundamental good that I hope Tesla, people will look back and say that Tesla achieved was that Tesla served as a catalyst to accelerate that transition. And I think we've done some good in that regard. The Chevy Volt is directly inspired by Tesla, and Bob Lutz at GM was kind enough to credit Tesla with that. In fact, when we unveiled the Tesla Roadster, he took the press release to his development team and said, if a little company in California can make an electric car, why can't we? And then that led to the Nissan Leaf and a bunch of other electric car programs. Yeah.
Grow as a tier 1 supplier to Daimler, Toyota, maybe others, but also as you build a broader line of cars that compete, how are you going to manage your business model of both of those?
Well, I don't think one has to create, I think it would be a false dichotomy to say that one cannot be a powertrain supplier and a car producer. We'll continue to sell powertrains as long as there are companies that want to buy powertrains from us at a reasonable price. I mean, the overarching goal of Tesla is to serve as a catalyst to accelerate the electric car revolution. So we're not trying to hold our technology close to our vest. We're really trying to get it out there and do whatever we can to catalyze the transition to electric vehicles. Now, there may come a point where there aren't deals that people are willing to do that make sense, or where we're not competitive in supplying powertrains, or where the other car companies just want to do it all in-house or something like that, in which case we wouldn't be able to do deals that make sense, and we wouldn't therefore do deals. We will always be a car company, though, and I feel very confident that we'll continue to make great cars and continue to add to the innovation with each successive model. At the end of this year, we'll be unveiling our Model X, which is kind of an SUV. Our goal will be to make something that is cooler than any SUV, but has more functionality than any minivan. So that would be a tricky thing, but I think we've got a shot at doing that.
Parenthetically, if you want to avoid borrowing money from your friends in the future, I'm happy to buy you a beer and talk about financial planning.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a free offer. But in all seriousness, I mean, you've had a remarkable career and will probably extend this career for quite some time. What, other than becoming a multimillionaire and doubling down in your deals again, what advice would you give to an entrepreneur and also to investors, how you approach creating value and being successful? What does it take, and what would you advise? Well,
I think it's important to have a very, to apply critical thinking to, this may sound trite, but to apply critical thinking to what one is doing. By that I mean just the fundamentals of logic, do you have the right axioms? Are they relevant? And are you making the right conclusions based on those axioms? That's the essence of critical thinking, and yet it is amazing how often people fail to do that. I think wishful thinking is innate in the human brain. You want things to be the way you wish them to be, and so you tend to filter information that you shouldn't filter. That's the most common flaw that I see. And then I also tend to see that people, instead of reasoning from first principles, they will tend to act in a manner, they'll do things because others are doing them. because there is a trend, or you know, they just see everyone going in that direction, so they think that must be a good direction to go, which is sometimes correct, but then sometimes, you know, you're going to run off a cliff or something. So it's much better to really look at things from, you know, as one would say in physics, from a first principle standpoint. What are the fundamental truths, or the most fundamental truths in an arena, and what can you, any conclusions, logic that you come to must be derived from those fundamental truths.
Elon, I want to just, can you expand on that for 1 minute? Because, you know, to me, the inspiration of Tesla and you is about the fortitude you had during tough times. You referenced it earlier, but, you know, as you know, the clean tech sector has had ups, it's had downs. You know, this is a room full of entrepreneurship in various forms. And, you know, the fortitude that you personally showed to get Tesla through that period, and people can reference the success you've had today, but talking about that fortitude and not letting those naysayers get you or Tesla down, I think would be an important message to just talk a little bit more about.
Well, I hate to say it, but the naysayers did get me down. Yeah, I think absolutely persistence is extremely important. You should not give up unless you're forced to give up. You know, unless there's no other choice. Now that principle can be misapplied if you happen to be trying to penetrate a brick wall with your head. You know, so you have to be cautious in always saying one should always persist and never give up, because there actually are times when you should give up, because you're doing something in error. But if you're convinced that what you're doing is correct, then you should never give up. There's a friend of mine who's got a good saying about starting companies, which I think is true. You know, starting companies is like eating glass and staring into the abyss of death. If that sounds appealing, be an entrepreneur.
Could you talk about job creation at Tesla, and specifically at the NUMMI plant in Fremont, and how many of the jobs that were lost from GM and Toyota when that plant shut down do you think you'll be able to replace in building the Model S there?
Sure. Well, so Tesla's a little over 1,000 people now. We actually doubled in size over the last year. We'll probably come close to doubling in size again this year, maybe 80% or something like that. A lot of those people will be at our headquarters in Palo Alto, but the biggest area of growth will be at the Fremont factory. We don't call it NUMMI anymore, we just call it the Fremont factory. You know, initially with the Model S and Model X, I mean, I think we'll be employing maybe on the order of 1,000 people at NUMMI, the Fremont factory. But our long-term aspiration is to actually employ as many, if not more people than were employed there. There were about 5,000 people that were employed at the plant, and maybe another 5,000 in suppliers around the Bay Area, and generally in California. So we'd certainly aspire long-term to employ even more than that. And it's just going to be a function of how fast we can grow the business without overreaching. But I'm hopeful that by the time we get to our third generation product, which would be the mass market car. So the Model S is about $50,000 to $100,000. It's kind of like a BMW 5 Series or Audi A6, A8, Mercedes E-Class, that kind of thing. But our third generation car, which would be on the order of $30,000, obviously much more of a mass market car. And we want to get to that vehicle as soon as possible, but it's probably about at least 4 years away. And that's really when we'd start to get to the full employment at Fremont.
Certainly now you're part of the electric car industry, and we've had a couple examples of the infrastructure required to charge, and of course the change in the electric power sector. If by 2030 we have 50% of new cars are electric, there's going to be a substantial need to have a different distribution system for electric power, presumably. Do you at Tesla or the broader electric car industry see some kind of role in that, or do you leave that to the electric power industry? And then part two, we had a fairly impassioned plea from both the investors and the government agencies who wield budgets as well as influence over policy, that the clean tech sector is absent in Washington, influencing policy, visiting senators, visiting legislators, and so forth. So the question is, what's the role for Tesla, both in the electrification part and then also in the political process and policy process to bridge that gap and get them both involved?
Well, to answer your second question first, Tesla is certainly doing everything it can to generate awareness and enthusiasm for electric vehicles in DC. In fact, I'm headed to DC tonight, and we'll be meeting with a number of senators and congressmen tomorrow. And then next month, Tesla will be opening up its DC showroom. And again, we're going to have a lot of senators and congressmen to that event, also people from the White House. So we're really doing everything we can. I agree it's something that's very important, and so we're doing whatever is within our power to do in that regard. And then with respect to the infrastructure, in the short term, I think there's very little need for infrastructure. Electricity is so widespread, and what we're seeing is that for the Roadster, almost all charging occurs at home and at night. So it maps well. In fact, the peak of when people charge corresponds almost exactly to the trough of grid usage. And so there's actually a tremendous amount of capacity in the grid to charge electric cars, provided people continue to charge their cars at home. Now, as we get to the point where we've got half of all the cars on the road or more being electric, there's certainly going to be a need for grid upgrades, charging stations, and an increasing need for that. But it's not something that I think is very pressing in, say, the next year or two. But Tesla, we do recognize that as an important long-term thing, and we are developing a high-speed charger, which is capable of recharging the battery pack in about 40 minutes or so. And we're gonna offer that for free to our customers. So we're gonna just pick locations along the major interstates every 100 miles or so, where there's a decent amount of traffic, and just install them for free. If they start to see significant usage, then we might put a card reader on them or something. I do think that's an important thing to address, so we're going to address it. We're also happy to sell those fast chargers to others if they want to install them in places. The other thing we've done with the Model S is we've designed the battery pack such that it can be swapped out in under a minute. It's just in the floor pan of the car. I'm not sure how many people will actually make use of that, but we wanted to have it in there just to preserve the optionality. Worst case, it makes it very easy to service, very easy to install a pack in the factory and that kind of thing. Yeah, between those, essentially those two things, plus offering a 300-mile range car, I think we've gone a long way towards addressing people's range concerns. In the back there?
Yes. Hi. I wanted to just, I was intrigued by what you said about first principles and sort of using critical thinking. My philosophy major's heart was warmed to hear some of that. We spend a lot of time, those of us who've been through the entrepreneur into the investor cycle spend a lot of time trying to get people with great ideas to reduce them to things like that. And I'm wondering if you have any suggestions, reading educational materials, or place people who are struggling with how to make their big idea, or at least evaluate whether they can get it done, to sort of construct from the ground up a path that at least has, as you said, success as one of the possible outcomes.
Yeah, well, actually that's where physics is really helpful, except in unexplored areas of physics, or difficult to explore. Physics is very helpful for figuring out whether you're violating one of the, say, the fundamental laws, like are you conserving momentum and energy? If you're not, then you probably are not going to be successful. Or if you think you're not. Yeah, but I think one thing, try to get to a useful prototype as soon as possible with the least amount of money. I think that's usually a good idea. Everything works on PowerPoint, and so people are somewhat skeptical if they see a PowerPoint presentation or a website or something. But if they see the actual hardware and it's working, that is much, much more convincing. That's why the first thing we did with Tesla was to create a prototype Roadster. That was the first order of business, to show people that it was real and it actually did work. And even though it was somewhat of a hack, it still gave people the feeling of what it could be. So I think generally that's a good move. It also will help identify if what you're trying to do is impossible or extremely difficult or something like that.
As an entrepreneur, I'm sure you value working in a fast-paced, dynamic, and challenging environment, but sometimes that doesn't scale very well. And now that both Tesla and SpaceX are well over 500 employees each, I'm curious if you can speak to the challenges of making that transition and how you preserve that fun environment, if you do at all. I'm assuming you try.
Certainly try. Yeah, it's a good question. And I mean, something that I don't necessarily have a great answer for. I think as the companies get bigger, it's harder and harder to maintain a sort of a fun, dynamic feeling, and to avoid being sort of a soul-destroying sort of corporation. And so, I think it's important to allow for a certain amount of chaos in an organization. If you try to impose too much structure, or if you don't allow failure, if a lot of companies, particularly as they get bigger, tend to have a risk-reward asymmetry. Failure is severely punished. Success is moderately rewarded. That's not a good idea if you want to be innovative, because by its very nature, innovation will result in many attempts that don't work. So, I think Google's been pretty good at this by allowing people to take a Friday every week and work on some crazy project. I think that's a good idea. I think we're probably going to implement something like that at SpaceX, and then later at Tesla. Because I think there's a lot of employees have great ideas if they can simply get the resources to implement them, and if they aren't filtered through their manager. And then I think just generally trying to be a little bit irreverent, to encourage people to do eclectic, odd things, and that's okay. There's not going to be some sort of conformist police that comes chasing you down. If, for example, when we just did the launch of Falcon 9 and the inaugural launch of our Dragon spacecraft, we had a secret payload on board. It was, in fact, a stamped top secret on the outside. It was a wheel of Gruyere cheese. So, I don't know if anybody's heard the Monty Python cheese shop sketch, but it's sort of a tribute to Monty Python in this case.
Sorry, hello? Yeah, just one quick question, Elon. Mm-hmm. Earlier in your talk, you described 3 big trends that you observed in the 90s around the internet, around space, around the energy system. Has any of that changed? Would you add to that list, or do you think you're still in the right place?
No, I think those are the 3 big areas that will most affect the future of humanity, and there are many others, and other people may come up with a different list. That was just the list that I came up with. I mean, I do think there's a great deal of innovation that's going to occur in biotech, particularly with with rapid, low-cost, perfect decoding of DNA. I think that's going to be really revolutionary as far as diseases and potentially accelerated evolution in some way. Well, that's a touchy subject. But that's certainly the potential for a huge change there on the DNA side. But I think overall, for the 21st century, the biggest single problem that humanity faces is sustainable production and consumption of energy. And there's so much. I mean, that's such a huge problem that there's so much that can be done in arena that, I mean, it's really more than enough to absorb, I think, any number of startups and companies, because it's such a tough problem and it's such a big problem. You know, there's so many uses of energy that need to be sustainable. I mean, Tesla's working on cars, but there's boats, there's planes, there's you know, all sorts of other mobile transport things, and then production of energy is also going to be a tough one. We obviously can't keep using hydrocarbons to generate electricity. That's not sustainable. Whatever one may think about the climate debate, I think it's probably not a good idea to run the experiment of seeing how much CO2 the atmosphere can hold. Because even if it's 99% likely to be okay, that's, you know, still not good.
Tesla is not just an automotive company. It is also a vehicle distribution company.
Right.
So far, you've retained ownership of your entire distribution channel.
Yeah.
As you grow into the rest of the world, is that intended to be something you hold to or something you diversify?
No, yeah, our current plan is to do sales and service within Tesla as company-owned stores. Because I think the car buying experience and servicing experience is generally not great. In fact, most people would probably rank going to buy a car as their worst retail experience. So it's really important that I think we fix that situation. And we've got some ideas that I think are going to make it a lot more appealing and pleasant to own a car. And we want to implement those ideas. You know, I think the way that Apple has done their stores is a really good way. And in fact, the guy that really led the charge on Apple stores, George Blankenship, is our head of sales. And we're still a long way from perfecting the buying and servicing experience. But I think you're going to see some dramatic improvements in the coming years that are not like any other car buying or servicing experience.
Last question. As an entrepreneur, when you get up in the morning, what excites you? And when you go to bed at night, what keeps you up?
Well, you know, like I said in the beginning, I'm really primarily an engineer, so I enjoy engineering. That's what I derive the most intrinsic satisfaction or happiness from. So, in fact, I happened to be up till 5 a.m. this morning working on an engineering problem for an improvement to the rocket, which I think will be good, hopefully. Otherwise, there's a lot of wasted sleep. So I really like, yeah, working on engineering problems, particularly with my engineering teams, and coming up with innovative ideas and making them a reality. That's what I enjoy the most.
Fantastic.
So, thank you.
I can tell you that Elon staying up till 5 a.m. Is not a unique thing. He really is the hardest working guy, not just the company, but that we work with. I'd say at least probably half of my conversations, and there have been many over the many years, have been after midnight with Elon. He has truly eaten glass. I've seen it firsthand. He has stared death in the face. And this is not from me, but Time Magazine and others describe him, and I think you can see why, as perhaps one of the greatest entrepreneurs of our 21st century. Thank you, Elon.